Hello and welcome to Underlords Universe. This is a place where uh, we get together and talk about a lot of the stuff that has inspired us over the years to be creative in our own right. Um, this is an episode of our movie Mausoleum where we take a look at old horror films that we grew up on and kind of question whether or not they should be resurrected or if they should stay in the crypt, so to speak. Um, we're gonna basically we're looking at this as a conversation, maybe more so than a strict review. There's other people out there who do a better job at that stuff than us. We're kind of reminiscing in a sense where we pulled out an old classic. Well, I don't know if it's a classic. I don't know, Brent. Do you think it's a classic?
I don't know about that. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Um, and so if you like what you see, like, subscribe, give us a comment. The movie in question today is called My Bloody Valentine, the 1981 version. It was remade, I think, in 2009, but we're
2009.
talking about the 1981 version here. So, there might be some spoilers along the way if you've never seen it, but yeah, I mean, if the spoilers pop up, they pop up. You've been forewarned. Um, I just want to say this is a movie that I owned. I should have grabbed I should have dug up my copy of it. I still have somewhere. I have a copy of the an old VHS copy of it. And
And for young people, VHS is tape.
yeah, because right, the big clunky cassette tapes. But um, yeah, and because I had it on VHS, I watched it, I don't know, a number of times, quite a few times growing up as a
Oh,
kid. Like I said, the movie came out in 1981. It's My Bloody Valentine. They're trying to capitalize on like the idea of holiday themed horror films, slasher films. I jotted down a few notes that I thought would put this into context. So Halloween is kind of like obviously the classic, right? It's the classic slasher film. 1978. Um, you could say that Black Christmas, which is 1974, is really kind of the main precursor, which is also a Canadian film, by the way. But Halloween really kind of sets the stage for this. Halloween had a budget of $300,000, and it made its box office takings was 70 million.
yeah,
So a huge, huge return on that investment. Friday the 13th comes in 1980. That had a budget of 550,000, and it pulled in about 60 million. So obviously it's like, hey, let's jump on the bandwagon. Let's do, some sort of holiday themed horror slasher film. My Bloody Valentine was released on February 11th of 1981. It had a budget nearly what four times what Friday the 13th did. It was a $2.3 million budget.
right.
It pulled in 5.7 million at the box office. So
Yeah,
it made its money back plus, apparently, but nowhere near, what Halloween and Friday the 13th had done. To set again a little context for that, Friday the 13th Part 2 came out in May of 81.
right.
Only a few months later. That had a budget of 1.25 million, so half the budget that My Bloody Valentine did, and it pulled in 27, almost 20, excuse me, I misspoke. Almost 22 million. So a significant drop from the first Friday the 13th, but still significantly more than My Bloody Valentine. So I just thought that was interesting context because because of the whole idea of like jumping on the idea of a slasher bandwagon kind of tale that's taking place, on a holiday. And there are
Right.
other, there's prom night and stuff like that. It's out there. So, but our discussion here is going to be based on our reactions to this of having watched. We both watched this again for the first time in a long, long time. So,
Hmm.
uh, do you want to kind of just give a quick kind of rundown of what the story is, or
Sure,
yeah,
sure. So, well, first of all, while watching this again for the first time in quite a while, as you said, um, I found myself referring to things that were cliche in this genre. But then it kind of hit me that, well, you can't really say it's cliche if this film was taking place when these other films were being made. So what's cliche now may not have been cliche back in 80 or 81, because like you said, Halloween was 78. The first Friday movie was 1980. Friday Part 2 is 81. This is 81. So we're really at the beginning of the big slasher era that started really in the late 70s, early 80s. But yeah, so the story is that in 1981 or thereabouts, in this mining town, and the film was made in Canada. It's Canadian, and they actually filmed outside and in real mines. So the mines that you see in the film, they're not. It's not a set. It's actually a real mine that they did some
That,
work to
yeah, yeah.
rehabilitate and make it look good for the movie. But it's actually they're shot underground. It's not, and they had to actually worry about things like lighting and methane and things like that. So it is filmed on location.
I
Um,
think is it Nova Scotia?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, the story is that 20 years prior to, there'd been an accident in the mine while there had been a Valentine's Day dance or party ongoing. And everybody that was a victim of the mine disaster, save one, Harry Warden, had been killed. And Harry had survived and had been found alive some weeks later. He had cannibalized in order to stay alive, and he was relegated to a mental institution. And he, it, as the story goes, Harry did not want any parties, dances, any celebrations coinciding with Valentine's Day because of the tragedy that had happened 20 years ago. And 20 years later, a group of teenagers and people who work in the mine and townsfolk are getting together to have a Valentine's Day celebration, a dance, a party. And there are some boxes of candy that are delivered with human hearts in them, and warnings not to hold the dance, the party. And of course, the warnings are, laughed
So,
at. They talk about Harry Warden, the
yeah.
legend of Warden. You don't believe it's true.
So that's
Meanwhile, go ahead.
yeah, well, I was gonna say that's a great spot though to bring back your point about the idea of like things being cliche. Because
Yeah.
they go ahead with this idea of a dance or a party. They're hanging out at the bar, and I think you make a really good point also about it's a mining town. Like everybody that works there, maybe with a few exceptions, the bulk of the people that live there work there at the mine. That's what they do, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it kind of gets this sense of a kind of an isolated community, but that there's this communal bond that they've got. And so they're in the bar and they're yucking it up, talking about the party that they're gonna have and all this stuff. And then the bartender, it's like,
Oh,
yeah, he
yeah.
interjects and it's like, y'all don't know what you're talking about. There's
Yeah.
danger here. Blah 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 blah. And it's like the most lazy kind of storytelling because it's just all exposition for the audience so that the viewer know what's happening. They could have laid those things out a little more creatively
I mean,
in
yeah, he tells the story, so you as the viewer know what the story is. But they could have told the story and then fast forwarded 20 years.
they could have done that, or they could have had the different characters interacting with each other, you know,
Yeah.
in such a way that it lays out what happened and, give us the viewer a little bit of credit for being able to figure stuff out. But, whatever. It's just a
Right.
cheap slasher film. So, but then the question is like, well, is that a cliche? It's like, well, I don't know, in 1981, I don't know enough about the I don't know enough to really say it's a cliche period, but what I can say is that oh, excuse me, it really takes from, like in Friday the 13th, uh the first Friday the 13th when
Hmm.
you know is it Ralph.
Ralph, yeah.
Ralph's, riding. I love when he's riding around on his bicycle. You're all doomed. You're all doomed. And it's like it's the same thing. It's the same,
Right.
you know. Um, and also to that point, I thought, and this will pick back up to the idea of the story. Um, And I've checked out a couple of, you know, bits here on My Bloody Valentine to see if anybody else has picked this up. But I haven't seen anybody say this. There's a bit of Jaws in My Bloody Valentine because they want to hold this party, and then you get, like the first killing with the heart and the little, the little note inside, and you get the sheriff
Mm-hmm.
who suddenly gets all, kind of panicked about this. And then you get the mayor, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
we can't allow any parties, and it's just like, you got to close the beaches. It's like it's
Yeah.
identical in that sense to Jaws. It's
Yeah.
almost like the people who wrote this was like, let's take Jaws and Halloween or Friday the 13th and do a mashup of them. So in
Yeah.
that sense, it's not very original at all, but it does then kind of lead to, well, back to the plot. They're going to have this party anyway. And so they defy, the authorities. They have this party. And in the midst of all this, there's this love triangle between the main character, TJ, and Axel, and I think it's Sarah, right?
Right.
And amidst all of that, chaos ensues. Harry Warden goes on a slasher raid, and that's the movie basically, right? Um,
Right. And it's everybody knows everybody. It's a small mining town. They all work together. They all know each other. The movie has a bit of a claustrophobic feel, I think, because not so much just because of the mining situation that's part of it, but there's really no point during which the movie expands beyond the boundaries of this little town at this area. Everything happens like right in there.
yeah,
The
yeah.
killings all happen there. Of course, during the party, one of the girls like, "Let's go down to the mine." Oh, we can't do that. Let's go down to the mine. It'll be fun. Of course, let's go down to the mine. What could go wrong? Well, quite a bit actually, but so there's that too. But it does have a bit of a claustrophobic feel to it for me, and
Mhm.
I think from claustrophobia, like a lot of people. Um, Not to topic jump, but this might be something worth discussing. I believe that there's 9 or 10 minutes of the film, the original movie, that were cut out because it was deemed to be too graphic.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now, that said, the movie itself, I don't believe is very graphic. Would you agree? Which is
I don't,
fine. Kind of
I don't
leaves
think so.
it kind of leaves to your imagination. Not that there's a lot of great kills or even a lot of suspense, but it's not a graphic movie. There's not a lot of blood, you
No,
know.
it's not terribly graphic. Um, like you said, they obviously cut, some of the stuff out, but it's 1981, so given what they cut out, how graphic, was it likely to have been? I haven't seen there's a version you can get with like the Blu-ray that has some of that footage restored, but to me it's kind of like I don't care enough to buy it, and you know whatever. But it
Look,
I do think the setting, you mentioned how the setting is very claustrophobic. I think that's, going back, watching this again after all these years, that's one of the reasons why I really liked it when I was a kid, was I liked the setting, just the idea of being like trapped in a mine with this maniac, on the loose. I thought it was a great idea. And I still think the aesthetics of it are pretty cool. Um,
mhm.
Now, whether or not it could have been executed, better, yeah, probably, but um, at the end of the day, I liked it. I still found it entertaining, and I think that the characters, a lot of characters, it seems like in a lot of comparable styled horror films of the modern era, just full of characters you just don't care about. And
Right.
I mean, not that these are characters with a lot of depth. They aren't, but there's a bit of charm and a little heart, I think, to these characters. And um, Yeah, you know, I bought into it enough to make it, an entertaining watch. And that's
Well,
kind of like all I was asking for, really.
I was going to ask you about the characters.
Yeah,
Like you said, generally speaking, they're not very well developed. In movies like this, they're not very well developed because they're disposable.
right.
So they don't go into, you don't really learn a lot about most of these characters other than they work together. And like you said, there's this triangle between Sarah and TJ and Axel, which is basically the main, well, the focal point of the story,
Hmm.
or one of the focal points throughout the movie, which ends up being, an important part of the story all the way to the end, as it turns out.
Yeah, because it also helps to set up a bit of a whodunit element because you don't know who, you know.
Right, right, and yeah, and you don't know that until basically the very end of the movie. So in that regard, if you've never seen it before and you don't really you haven't done any research, or you haven't Wikipedia'd it, and you don't know anything about it, maybe you'll be surprised at the end of the movie. Maybe you
Yeah.
won't be.
But I think it ultimately it's a matter of like, to a modern audience, this movie would be nothing.
Oh no.
It might even be boring to a modern audience. I think having grown up in this era, though, it has a nostalgia to it. And maybe that nostalgia is more personal to me just because I grew up with a copy of it and I watched it a lot, as a kid. And so watching it again for me, it's kind of hard to um, separate that. Watching it again, it was kind of like, oh, I remember that scene. Oh, I remember this scene. Oh, I could see
Yeah,
this coming, that kind of a thing. So,
yeah.
I can't really review it like objectively in that regard. Um, I don't know if you saw it as many times as I did growing up, so I don't know if you had the same kind of reaction. Or
No, I
did you
think you watch.
remember it much?
Oh yeah, parts of it.
Okay.
Certain there were certain kills I remembered, certain things that happened in the mine, some of the characters I remembered, but I don't think I watched it my recollection is you watched it a lot when we were kids, for one reason or the other.
Killing
um
time. Just put it on and just let it roll. That's why.
and, and there were other movies that you did that with too. I mean,
Yeah.
there were some you just watched a lot, that we watched a lot when we were, but I remember that I never owned a copy of this movie for whatever reason, so I think you watched it more than I did.
Yeah.
um One other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm not, um, it's funny because it's filmed in Canada, and so some of the way some of the words are pronounced, I think is funny. It's like there's certain
Mhm.
things that do and say that we don't say here in Iowa, and so that's a little. There were times where we kind of looked at each other and would, comment about on, the pronunciation or the way a word was enunciated, or the emphasis on a word or choice of a word, and
Well,
and
it's just a nice reminder. It's like, oh, it's a Canadian film,
yeah, it's yeah, you
without
can, yeah,
without it being like Strange Brew, where it's, totally over the top,
over. What do you think about the cinematography of it? Now, again, this is kind of in the early. This is made in the early stages of the kind of the slasher era. It's right at the birth of the slasher movies. What do you think about the way it's filmed, how it's filmed? We talked a little bit about the setting, but
Mhm.
what about just the general filming of the movie and how it's depicted?
I like it. I think I don't know how equipped I am to really evaluate things like cinematography. I don't know enough about it, but I think it looks good. I think that the movie looks good. I think part of that is the fact, like you said earlier, the fact is it's actually filmed on location in an old mine, and
Mm-hmm.
so you don't, at no point do I really get the sense of like, oh, this is a set, you know.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, I buy what they're selling in terms of the setting and and how it's filmed. I think just adds to that. So yeah.
And then, there are some scenes where you see it from Harry's perspective. It's like you are him, so you're walking into the laundromat, for example.
Oh yeah.
and you hear the breathing,
Yeah, like
through
it's
the
Darth Vader.
yeah, it's like yeah, of course he's got the oxygen mask on or whatever, the gas mask, and so you hear the breathing, and pretty much every time you hear that, you know that it's Harry.
Yeah.
But some of the scenes you can actually it's filmed as if you're seeing it through his eyes, and then of course there are times where you'll see him and the victim, and sometimes you'll just see the victim and you won't see Harry. So they change it up a little bit, in that respect. I agree with you. I think the setting is very, very good. Again, I find it to be quite claustrophobic, and I think it works. And you buy what they're selling,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, if I were in this group of people, what would I be doing? Probably getting the hell out of there. I mean, I don't know that I wouldn't, I don't think I would have gone into the mine, but then again, it's like, okay, am I going to stay topside while there's a guy running around killing people? Is there safety in numbers? Usually. But then, of course, what happens when they go below? They eventually decide we're going to split up. And we're like, yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, and that gets you back to the whole idea of a cliche, right? It's like, what's the easiest way to put characters into danger? Split them up, and it's like, okay, I mean, is there a level of creativity here that could be employed and that's not being, utilized? Um,
I don't know.
it's almost a Scooby-Doo element of, Shaggy and Scooby go this way and Fred.
Well, the whole story is kind of Scooby Doo because again, it's kind of like, well, who is this? Who's this?
Yeah.
Of course, they all they're all under the impression that it's Harry because they checked the place where he was. They checked the mental institution that he was at, and they have
Yeah.
no record of being there, which is weird. It's like, oh, he was here, but
Well,
we let him 5 years ago, or whatever. It's like, no, there's no record that he's even there.
and that's
So
okay. That you make an interesting point there because okay, maybe I'm just too stupid. We should have had Josh on this one because he's such a good he analyzes stories so well.
yeah,
But like, think about, okay, so Harry Warden was a real guy. I mean, not real in real life, but he in the story he was a real guy.
right.
That event allegedly happened.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up in this um, psychiatric hospital or whatever, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the new killer, spoilers aside, right? He's like it either is Harry Warden or it's somebody else, right? So
Right.
the police dude, the chief guy, he gets on the phone to the psychiatric ward and it's like, there's no record of Harry Warden ever having been there. It's like, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
Because whether I just don't understand that. It's like
I
like
better if they said, well, yeah, he was here, but one of two, it's like, oh, well, he died, or yeah,
or he
he hasn't been
escaped
here.
or
Yeah, he's here, but he hasn't been here for 10 years. We have no idea where he is. For them to say there's no record of him being, I don't know what that meant. I still don't understand that part of the story. What
yeah.
is the intent?
So if
I don't
you
get it.
if somebody out there's watching this and has figured that out, at least on this score, you're probably smarter than we are, so you can make a comment on that. But I didn't understand like what was the necessity of that. Um, because
I didn't get it.
it almost seems to suggest, and maybe this is it. Maybe that's to suggest that the legend itself isn't true, and that maybe it's not really Harry Warden, it's somebody else out there doing these killings. But
Or
but
or
if that's the case, then it's completely ridiculous because it's only 20 years before. It's like that's not that long of a period of time.
well,
And some
or
of
it
these
could
people would have been alive at that. They would have been
well,
little kids.
or it could be to try to drop the hint. Well, this is actually really Harry killing people because he was never actually here. So the story was true, but
Yeah.
he was never here. Oh, well, that
So,
explains it. Maybe he's out there killing people again because if he
okay.
was never, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. Okay, that does have some logic to it, but it's like so he's been hanging around like I don't know, hiding from in this tiny, small, isolated mining
Yeah,
town where no that's all people know is the mining industry. But somehow this Harry Warden guy has somehow slipped through the cracks. No one's noticed him shopping for, like
pickaxes and boiler,
or eggs or whatever,
Well,
just to
well,
survive for the last 20 years. But
yeah. I mean, obviously he keeps a calendar or a planner because every fourth or for every 14th of February he has to make sure that they're not hosting any parties.
right.
I mean, that's what he does. I mean,
But now that they are hosting this part 20 years later, now he has to like, go into action and
yeah, I mean, if he has a resume, that's what's on his resume. What do you do, Mister? Well, yeah, I mean, I check on things every 14th of February every year,
yeah.
but of course, as you get to the end of the movie, some of this stuff kind of plays itself out, and you do understand things because at the ending, everything is explained. Is I think satisfactorily,
And that's an
and everything
interesting word
kind
because
of makes sense.
okay. And that's kind of an interesting word though, because if you watch a movie and someone says, well, what'd you think of it? And you go, it was satisfactory.
Well, I like
Like,
the movie quite a bit, but when they wrap things up and they kind of try to put a bow on it because they want everything to make sense, right? So at
yeah,
the end of the movie, they basically try to explain everything without explaining it. You know what I'm saying? And I think however you
yeah,
would want to describe that, and it makes sense. It's kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. It's kind of like, yeah. I mean, maybe they could have done that better. Maybe not. Maybe they could have taken some of the ending and actually used it in the story a
yeah,
little bit, which would have maybe required them to flush out the characters a little bit more
yeah,
because don't know a whole lot about TJ and Axel other than that they are vying for the affections of the same girl.
yeah.
Other than we really don't know anything about them until the end. We learn a little bit more about them.
Well, and again, not to necessarily give it away, but like when they do reveal a little bit of that at the end, there's, a little bit of a lift from Friday the 13th in there in terms of who the killer witnesses something and when he was
Right,
a kid or whatever and and it's so like done in literally like 7 seconds. It's like, oh, by the way, this is what happened, done. And it's like, okay,
right,
so it might quote unquote explain some of it, and it might be satisfactory, but only I would suggest to the extent that at the end of the day, it's a slasher film. It's not meant to be that deep. It's just meant to be some element of entertainment. So I guess that, that brings me to the question of like, it's a hard question to ask. Like, would you recommend this movie? I don't know. Like, I don't know who I'd recommend it to necessarily. If someone said like, well, I like 80s horror films, then I'd recommend it to them. If you're a younger person, maybe and you're growing up in a different era with a different sensibility about what, a horror film should be, I mean, maybe not, you know. If you're a younger person but you're interested in the history of horror films, and well, then maybe yeah. So I think it kind of depends. For me personally, um, I give it like 3 out of 5 stars because I do find it entertaining. It was nostalgic to watch it again.
mm-hmm.
What do you think in terms of, wrapping this up?
I give it 3.5, maybe 4 stars.
Okay.
And to your the question you put forth, I would recommend it to people who like, you know, maybe campy. Not that this is campy; it's not.
Well,
They're cheesy and like we going looking back 40 years, maybe a little bit cliche, but people that like traditional slasher 80s style horror movies because this is right in that genre, right? It fits perfectly in there. If you like a little bit of, like I remember at the beginning of the movie, there's the happy music and the scene, the obligatory scene where everybody's getting along with each other and chumming it up, and there's good time music and stuff, and it's like, okay, you got to have a little bit of that. So there's a little bit of everything in there for everybody. So I would recommend it. I would say if I knew the person pretty well and said, hey, if you like 80s style slasher films, if you like Halloween, if you like Friday, um, and you've never seen this movie, you might want to check it out. I would recommend it without any hesitation, because I do think it's a good film for what it is. Is it going to win any awards? Probably not. But is it
Yeah.
a good movie for what it is, and it doesn't try to be anything other than that? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So with that in mind, we kind of throw this question out occasionally. The you know the playlist that we're putting these movie reviews in is called the Movie Mausoleum. And with an older movie, the question is, should it be resurrected or should it, remain in the crypt? And I would say I would resurrect this again. Like maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, if we're lucky enough to, I'll still be around. Around Valentine's Day, I might pull this out again and give it another whirl. You know, barring something, unless there's something else better to do. But the weather's, cold and kind of gross out. I might put this on. So I'd
Yeah.
resurrect this. I think it's worthy of being resurrected. But again, like you said, it's not going to win any awards. It's not a great film.
No, I'd resurrect it. And maybe at some point we should go back and watch the 2009 version again, because I know we saw that. I mean, it's hard to believe it's been 15, 16 years ago that we
Yeah,
saw that. But
not in the theater, but yeah, maybe next Valentine's Day we'll do that. So a year from now, we'll.
yeah, and maybe another group of people that may want to watch this is people that just don't like Valentine's Day. If you don't like
Yeah, well,
Valentine's
yeah,
Day,
maybe.
you think it's a Hallmark holiday and you hate Hallmark holidays and you're opposed to it, just for you hate everything it stands for, watch this movie and watch Harry kill people that are trying to have a Valentine's Day party.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'll be better.
yeah. Okay. So, I don't know. I got nothing else on this movie. Yeah, okay.
I,
Well, let me
I
just,
think we
what?
hit it. I think we hit it pretty good.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick plug for our own stuff here. Uh,
Uh,
we're part of a broader creative conclave of guys. The other guys don't do a lot on the YouTube front. They leave that to us to kind of spread the word. But we do a musical project called Underlords of the Overworld, which uh, has these plastic things called CDs. It's also streaming. It's actually a conceptual project. It has both instrumental and music with vocals. Some of the material is actually character driven because there's a literary universe. The bass player Josh writes into the name H. Prescott Lemon, and there's a series of really quirky books about this odd band with the same name, Underlords of the Overworld. It's kind of an alternate fiction history kind of a thing with a really weird twist to it, and then kind of an occult oriented yet kind of goofball, not really goofball, but kind of absurd um, group of occultists who are subcontracted by the U.S. government. That's called the OAO series. Anyway, if you're interested in supporting local art, uh, Josh's books under the name again, H. Prescott Lemon. He's available on Amazon, Bandcamp, Spotify, etc. You can find the music if you're interested in checking it out. Please do. And like, subscribe. If you've seen My Bloody Valentine, give us a comment down below. Yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Anything else
or
you
if
want to
people
say?
if people want CDs, they can let us know. We have CD copies available,
Yeah.
and we did a, I think it's worth mentioning. We had former Iron Maiden singer Blaze Bayley sing one of our songs, which we're
Hmm.
really proud of. We've had Derek Sherinian, formerly of Dream Theater, and Alice Cooper, and play on a couple songs. So we're proud of the music, and there's like you said, there's a quite a good variety there. A lot of good stuff there. So if people want the streaming, it's out there on a lot of the platforms, and if you want CDs, we have hard copies. So if you want any of that stuff, just let us know. Otherwise, the books are available on Amazon. I think all the books are out on Amazon now, aren't they? I
I
think.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Until next time. Thanks for checking it out, and Have a good one. Happy Valentine's Day.
Wednesday.
Yeah, all right. Okay. In addition to Happy Valentine's Day, I got to find out where the stop button is on this recording system. I will find it. It's right here. Toodles. Okay. Bye, y'all.